So, thanks to be here. I have the pleasure to be here not alone on stage tonight, but with a really great panel. I would suggest all of you come on stage at the same time, and then I do a quick introduction. So, starting ladies first, and that's the only thing regarding the lady I'm going to say, was Miriam. Because I have to say, Miriam, from the one hand, super thankful that you joined us so on such a short notice. Because we needed a payment expert, as one other payment expert from Visa had to move tonight on quite a short notice, so you jumped in. And you founded RatePAY a while ago. I think it's now close to 10 years, so 2010 you founded, if I'm not mistaken. And in addition to that, you are also very, very engaged in the ecosystem. You are with me on the FinTech Rat. You are engaged with payment and banking, actually founded Payment Exchange, or at least were very involved from the beginning. And also, this is something I would really like to emphasize in case you don't know about it and in case you are looking for ways to really support talents. Miriam is also very engaged in Hacker School, supporting young talents very early on when it comes to digitalization and the foundation for what we need in the future when it comes to our talent base. So great to have you on the panel today. Dominik to your left, and to be fair, so tonight, compliance-wise, this is completely horrible for me. So Jörg, I'm working with him on the Ministry of Finance. He worked for Goldman. Goldman invested in us. Talanx is a shareholder of us. finleap is a shareholder of us. So tonight, horrible. Please please forgive me any mistakes when it comes to this. So, moving over to Talanx, Dominik Hennen is actually board member of Talanx Versicherungen. So Talanx is a name most of you might not know, because this is actually more the name for the stock exchange. You might know Hannover Rück, you might know Versicherungen, you might know HDI. They all belong to the same group. And in addition to being responsible for the sales side of the Versicherungen, you're also a member of the Global Digital Board of Talanx, because Talanx is actually quite a global group. And I'm sure we are going to speak about this in a bit more detailed in an instant. So great to have you on board on the panel as well. Speaking about insurance, because indeed we rebranded from digital banking to digital finance, not only because we switched to English, but also because now we see that the ecosystem involves not only the banking side, but absolutely also the insurance side. And another very, very large player in this field is obviously Allianz. And tonight it's a pleasure to have Nazim on stage from Allianz X. Allianz X, and I'm sure a lot of you read about that, is a 100% subsidiary focusing on late-stage investments. There were quite a few significant investments you made, and we will touch these in an instant as well. You are running Allianz X as CEO, and really having a strong view on how the industry develops, what are interesting players, from the investor perspective. And Jörg mentioned that it's quite important for us that we have large institutional investors as well to strengthen the ecosystem here, but also to making sure that we have access to the newest trend and the most important trends globally from the German perspective. So great to have you on stage. And then last but not least, Ramin, I'd say for most of you here, you are definitely the one who is strongly associated with driving fintech in Germany and the discussion around fintech, being the founder of finleap. And as already I disclosed that you're an investor, I was also one of the first employees of you when you founded finleap. So it was great founding some ventures together with you and the respective management teams. So you are the company builder behind Solaris Bank, FinReach, and quite a lot of other ventures as well. So it's great to have your perspective on what is going on here on stage tonight as well. Starting exactly with this, Ramin, maybe after all what Jörg just explained, and I have to admit I'm super happy that we have Jörg in the Ministry of Finance, because as you might have seen within his speech as well, there's a huge difference having someone there with a true industry understanding and truly being close to what are the key important trends. It would be interesting to get your view on where do we stand actually when it comes to the digitalization of the ecosystem and the industry.
Okay, thank you, Chris, for the nice words. Okay, it's a big question. I don't have 30 minutes for a keynote, but I agree, Cookies I think it's good to have him, who comes clearly from the private sector. I was laughing when he said, we get it. And it's right, he mentioned all the points I would have mentioned tonight as well. So this is the problem is rather how do we get there then? Yeah, and so that's also describing a little bit, I think, the state where we are. I have the feeling when you listen to these keynotes, we're talking about fintech. It's not the first conference about fintech. Even we now do it in English. It's also not the first English conference about fintech. So we know what we do. I think we just don't do it right yet. So we don't do it in the right speed. We don't do it really across Europe. So when I look at the state, we have, especially on the front end, the UX, the consumer problems which are solved. There are good solutions, apps, offers. Companies, but let's say, especially when it comes to integration of a lot of other services, back office processes, all the regulations, especially outsourcing gets a big problem, I think, right now for fintech, especially where they become bigger and take over a lot of more processes. So we're hitting reality, and the company is getting too big that we just can shift around reality. Especially, I think it's true for a lot of companies here, a lot of fintechs which do. It's not right that you put fintechs always in the positioning that say, okay, they're the ones who grow because there were no regulations. I think a lot of fintechs stuck to regulation, followed the regulations, was a good business for a lot of lawyers. There's even more better business now around this crypto ways. So I think this regulation needs to get easier. It needs to fasten up, and it's more a question of how. I would say it to answer the question in short, the status on the B2C side, yes, you have solutions for the customer, but they're not integrated at the front end, but they're also at least not integrated in the back end. And I think that we need to work on, and this cannot work without having the right regulation framework, because otherwise modular banking, as we all wish for, does not really work when you have always a lot of processes and compliance about it, and then the solutions get slow and not so well integrated anymore.
I mean, going through the start really was a quick view from all of you. I think especially what you just mentioned, the connection between different players. Maybe, Miriam, this is a good connection to you, because RatePAY is doing B2B business, working with a lot of cooperation partners. Would be interesting to get your view on where do we stand and how good is actually B2B working as of now.
So yes, actually we work with we have a lot of cooperations, strong partners that we work with, and that is really also partners that in some way also are competitors on other sides. So it's quite interesting. My thoughts here on Europe and how we can do things better, or what would makes life easier for us if we would have better identity data. Yeah, it is really a big thing. I think Mr. Cookies was talking about this too, and I think that we don't have like a uniform standard here in Europe, and that would, if we would have this, I think it would really, really help us. And I was discussing this because there is this data transfer project here from Twitter, Google, and Microsoft. I don't know if you're all aware of this. I was taking some research on this, and I saw actually it's quite interesting because they set up a uniform standard in order to share data with each other, and this was their answer to the European GDPR, which I thought was quite interesting. And let's say we in Europe didn't do anything about this. We just created GDPR, and nobody was really aware what to do with it, and everybody was afraid. But I think actually now if you see that there is a lot of, let's say, antitrust concerns at the moment against American technology concerns, against Facebook, etc., it could be a great chance for us to use this regulatory framework that we created and set up a kind of like European database pool, which could also be, I mean, it would also be great to have this pool for all kinds of applications for open banking.
Nazim, looking at the industry from a completely different perspective, being a very, very large investor, looking at a lot of companies, what is your view on where do we stand in Europe at the moment?
Look, first of all, does it work? Yeah. Okay. So first of all, I do think we have a good standing, and maybe also let me add a couple of sentences to the regulatory topic. So I think that's important, but we should not hide behind that, right? So this is also very important. We should not think that regulation will save us and that regulation will make sure that we get the global champions. I think global champions evolve out of good ideas, good entrepreneurs, and people who understand how to execute. And when we talk about companies like Facebook or Google or all these companies, I am confident and I'm sure that each of these companies at one point knocked the doors also in Europe when they were capital raising. And we declined because we said, oh, you're not making any profit, you're not a profitable company, so no, we can't invest. So what I'm saying that is, yes, regulation is important, but we should change the attitude. The attitude towards saying, we embrace the entrepreneurial spirit, and we also understand that failing is part of it, and failing is okay, failing increases your experience. I think that will be the part that will really make sure that global champions evolve. So coming to what you said, where do we stand? I think it's not that bad, right? As you were saying, we have done a couple of investments over the globe, and if you just look at some of the challenger banks, or if you compare challenger banks in Europe that everybody is talking about, I would say the only pan-European challenger bank is a German challenger bank, right? That operates really over 20 countries. So it's not those in the UK that just operate in the UK or now coming over to one country. So it's not bad. So there is a good happening there. The second thing is also, if I look at what we as Allianz do, all the things that we're doing, yes, we're an incumbent, but we do also implement the technologies that we have. And that's also something that we do on a global basis, on a European basis. So things are moving on. Are we there where the US is or China is? Maybe not yet, but I'm optimistic.
Very good. I have to admit, I hope all of you leave the room tonight optimistic and also tomorrow. That's like a key goal of Bitkom anyway, to work for the positive side, that we actually are the influencing the future ourselves. Dominik, when we discussed before this panel, you mentioned that you're traveling quite often to the Silicon Valley also to compare business ideas between there and here. What is your view?
First of all, good evening, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for the invitation, Chris. Look in the US, look into Silicon Valley. I think there are 4 or 5 things they do differently, or the states in general. The one thing, of course, is the regulatory environment. We've heard it a couple of times tonight. But there's also the topic of talent development and talent acquisition. There's the topic of the startup and founding culture, how they approach it, and I'll go deeper in a minute. There's the topic of access to capital, Mr. Kokis mentioned it before, and of course the infrastructure topic. Let's focus on talent, for example. Go into education. The universities, and I studied there as well, they're much closer to the corporate business world. They're much more practical. They issue lots of patents, much more patents than German or European universities do. The topic of AI is like a major subject. Lots of universities have chairs with topics of AI, which is not so, where Europe is not so far at the moment. Take the high school example from China. China has AI as a subject in high school. Why shouldn't we think about it? This is one thing, like the whole talent pool. Sourcing abroad. I think we in Europe could better source talent abroad. The French has a tech visa for 4 years, ease of immigration. Why don't we have a European tech visa to get talent from Israel, from China, or from the US, for example? So this is one thing we definitely have to work on. The founding culture, Nazim mentioned it. Culture of failure, this is what the Silicon Valley has. Here, if you fail once, that's it. You don't get any more capital, you're done. So what I thought, when we discussed before, we need to get more tech giants to settle down in Europe to get this whole culture of startups. One example was Ireland. Ireland, they settled down Facebook and Microsoft, I think, due to tax reasons. They spent billions or millions of dollars into tech parks. Talent came and venture capital came. They have 3 times as high venture capital than we have in Germany per person. So this is something we should work on. Well, access to capital, your Cookies mentioned it before. I think we need more institutional investors, definitely, and we should do something with tax incentivization, no doubt about it. But we also should do something with universities. Stanford has a 30 billion fund which they use to invest in startups. Which university in Europe does have that? So we can enforce that much more, to be honest. And we also could enforce so that private investors, as you, can invest more easily in venture capital. UK does it. They have like a venture capital trust or something where you as a private investor can pay $10,000 into this fund, easy process, tax incentivized. So these are things I thought about. The regulatory environment, we discussed this. And the infrastructure, my 5th point, I guess, we need to have a better infrastructure in terms of internet in Europe, especially in Germany. I read an article a couple of weeks ago. We are number 35 in internet speed in the world and 45 on mobile speed. So this is something we have to work on in Europe altogether. And these are like the 4 or 5 points which I think the US does a bit better than we do. But my end phrase is going to be, we are not that bad as everybody talks about. As you said, Nazim, we are not that bad. We are on the right way when it's just not fast enough. And we have to think bigger than just regulatory environment.
Maybe looking at what you just described, and as you are in the digital board of Talanx, why did you decide this approach in order to transform the established player Talanx to go for an internal group? And when I looked at Nazim's approach, for example, let's say not completely different, but at least different. So it would be interesting to get your perspective why you choose the respective way to go for digitalization.
So I mean, like, how or why did we transform Talanx into a global player in the digital
more
world?
Like, why did you choose an internet digital board? So
yeah.
when I look
Okay.
at this panel, I'd say we have 3 different models how to do that. Yeah. I would not judge against each other, but I think it would be interesting to get your perspective why you choose the respective way. Talanx, the internet digital board, Allianz X as an investor, and finleap obviously working with a lot of corporates in the digitalization. So it would be interesting to get your view on why did you go for this digital board, the way you set it up in order to drive digitalization at Talanx.
Yeah, okay, got it. Well, first of all, I think that there are 2 ways to digitalize a global player. The one is like from outside in, so you build like a digital speedboat on the side of the core business, and after a certain point of time, you reintegrate the speedboat into the old world, to say. And the other way, this is what we chose, is to digitalize from inside, from ourselves, by using lots of partners on the other hand. And well, the way we did it, you mentioned the digital board I'm in. Our global CEO, of course, he's like the driver behind it. And that's like the key success factor for digital transformation from my point of view. Culture, 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 and starting from the CEO. And the way we did it is he put digital and agile on his agenda. He created this board. It's only 6 or 7 people in this board who represent the whole world of Talanx, which is a global player. And he gave us focus areas. He said, I want to develop into artificial intelligence, ecosystem, and behavioral economics. That's what I want to grow in. You make sure that the business units get the thought, but you don't dictate the business units to transform it. It's their own responsibility. You empower the business units and give guidance and focus, but they have kind of to translate it into the real world, because local needs in South America are differently than in Poland or in other countries. So this is why we did the digital board. And maybe 1 or 2 more comments. I think culture is the primary thing for digitalization. This is nothing new. Our CEO always says, culture eats strategy for breakfast, or recently said, culture eats digital transformation for breakfast. If you don't empower your people, don't show them what means agile, what are agile tools, if you don't implement collaboration tools, if you don't do transparency within the company, it's not going to work. Forget about technology, forget about tech enablers. You need culture. You need the tech enablers as a basis, and of course you need partners. That's what you mentioned. We have to partner with the world outside. We cannot build everything on our own. It doesn't make sense. Let's partner with the startups. We're not enemies, we're friends, we're partners, and that's how we can kind of scale up on digitalization.
Maybe, I mean, this is like the guaranteed handover to Ramin. As we are partnering at finleap with a lot of corporates, do you see developments there over the last 4 or 5 years since the foundation of finleap? I mean, I remember the first stories about the new startups being the competitors, and now we are always speaking about the ecosystem. What is your perspective on the trend? And what can we learn maybe from that for the future?
So I think we have always challenged with the same 3 things, right? It's always about talent and culture. It's always about capital. It's always about speed. So, and I think that's what we try to combine when we also work with institutional partners and investors, because we are not so much believe that the world is so fast moving, and we are in Europe well positioned in Germany. However, it's very hard and it takes a lot longer. I mean, Mr. Cookies also made already jokes about it, that the fintechs are not so intermediating as maybe we all saw it 5 years ago. So we try to position never on the one side or the others. We always try to combine. I think a corporate, an established organization has a lot of synergies, a lot of market power, a lot of market distribution power. This to combine with the agility and the speed of new companies, and very important, a talent and a culture you can build up with the right mindset and the right mix of talent. I think so. This has not really changed. You still need good tech talent, but you still need financial experts, and you also still need entrepreneurs who focus on. I think what has changed a little bit is, of course, the available capital, especially in the, let's say, in the seed area, sort of. Like when I remember 5 years ago, we always said, it's easy to get 100 and 200K. Now it's maybe easy to get 1 million to 2 million, but it's not so easy to start a business with 10, 20, 30 million. And so that's where we try to help up early on to give initial seed funding quite well, to all then fulfill all these different aspects and grow that way. Yes, but again, we need to, on all the 3 aspects as well, we have to get better. And the cooperation models, I think we're glad that we have corporates like Talanx and Allianz who are heavily investing, I mean, not we as finleap, we in Germany, have corporates who are heavily investing in it. Funny enough, it's really much the insurance companies who invest. Thanks. I mean, I don't know if it's not public, but I can share because we are amongst friends. So we have more Asian investors.
Twitter out for a second.
So we have more Japanese investors than German investors, and that shows something. And they all okay. It's actually the Japanese development because one is one of them. But that's also interesting that the Japanese Development Bank is investing in the finleap ecosystem, but KfW, I don't know when the last meeting was, probably a long time ago. But we have a lot of insurances actually investing in it. Even we do a lot of banking stuff as well, so it's great that you open up this conference to both sides. So I think that changed and accelerated I think the corporations a lot, that the insurances have come into the play, because fintech in the beginning was very much banking, and so now when we're broadening it up, it was actually getting better on the capital side.
So Nazim, obviously, as Allianz X is not only investing in insurance businesses, but indeed also in other business models. What are your learnings from the last years running Allianz X?
In respect to what?
In the respect of how successful has this an impact for the transformation of Allianz as a group, and does it pay out learning-wise, investment-wise, as a tool in order to drive digitalization?
Well, let me start to explain you first of all how we invest, and Ramin knows that. So, we don't invest just for the purpose of getting the financial return. So when we invest, we want to see an opportunity that we can create or generate together with the company. So that could be something where we say, we can develop a new product, and that could be a distribution channel. It could be really setting up a complete new business together with that company, because we can merge topics together, or it could be really on our end also taking over companies 100%, as was announced this week with the first acquisition that we have conducted. So that is very important. So that means before we invest into a company, we will bring in our operating entities or global lines and say, is there an opportunity that we can generate? And then we would invest. So very important that we want to have an effect on our business, but on the same side, or on the same token, it's also important for the other side, right? Because we were talking, Deutsche Bank was talking about being a platform or getting on a platform. I say we as Allianz are a platform. I mean, if you look at us, 70 countries, we have direct access to 80 million people. Through the B2B, we have access to 250 million people. So, this is a platform that can give you the right scale and the right reach. So it is basically we give something and we get something. And if we don't have that, we don't do that. And the second part is coming to the digital transformation. Look, yes, you can have all the mantras like we want to be agile and we want to have tribes, we want to have all these things. So if you don't walk the talk, it doesn't work. What I always say is I've never seen somebody that you send into a seminar and then he comes out as a full agile person, right? That doesn't work. So you will change if you work together with those companies. So what that means is when we invest, there is a roadmap that we want to follow, and that is part of our investment agreement. So, and that roadmap means we need to execute that. And when you execute that, you have two teams coming together, and there is a guideline, and there is a milestone plan, and people have committed to do that, because otherwise we can become an animal. And that really changes people, right? Because the one party is pushing the other party is pushing the one party. So that's how you can become agile, that's how you can change, that's how you can change the culture. And that's what we try to do, and I think we're doing it good, and we are performing well on that.
Perfect. As you mentioned, the high importance of teams, of culture, Miriam, handing over to you, in your experience on the talent side, what is your view on how good are the talents available here? How easy or hard is it to get the right talents? We spoke about this as well, and maybe Hacker School, but also talents in general. Both.
So it's not easy to get good talents. I mean, it's always one of the biggest challenges, I think. Also, get the talents, put them on the right places, and get them really going and get them full with energy that they also do the things that they're supposed to do. how do we get talents? Actually, we had let's say, a good experience in the last years to get talents over our own people. So a lot of our own people do acquire other talents. That helps us a lot because I think we have a really low rate of people that leave the company. There are some leavers, but actually we became a huge family in a way, and that helped us a lot. That was one thing, so recommendations from our people. Also, our office is next to the Technical University of Berlin, so actually they have a huge data science teams there, so we'd start to, let's say, attract the guys there, and it's mostly guys, unfortunately. But we have a lot of students of them, and actually it was the students that built up our data science team 3 years ago. They started, let's say, they found, because we didn't work with AI since, let's say, 3.5 years ago, and the students started to build up something because they said something to us. They said, hey, you have so many data, that's great, we can really work with this, and they forced us to really do something. And I think this is one thing that you also give young people a chance, that you don't go there as the boss and say, yeah, you have to do it like this, and you have to get the people doing things and get them out of there, let's say, you have to get to, let's say, empower them that they do the things. And so also with the students we got a lot, so that really helps us. We have problems with Java developers, so we do get Java developers from Russia, from everywhere, from relocation services. I think it's really a big problem. So I would really, if I think about Europe, it would be so much easier if there would be an easy solution, let's say, to get these people in from everywhere in the world that want to work here in Germany, that they can apply for jobs in Germany. That would really help us, and that is really a pain. And yeah.
Nazim, you wanted to add on this?
Yeah, one thing I wanted to add is when we speak about talent, so talent is a really very broad word, right? What are we talking about? And if it's just about coders, okay, that's one topic. But this sometimes seems like as if let's put it this way, as if the colleagues working in our companies and organizations are not talents. And I just want to correct it, because what you can see in the topics that we're doing is, if you set the people in the right context, they are talents, right? Because sometimes maybe we can't just leverage on their talents in the organization because the structures and the process are not set right. But if you set the right framework, if you set the right context, it changes. So it's not like, oh, we need to change 80% of our workforce because they're not talents. So I think, this is something we should also pinpoint and what we should also focus on.
Just add one thing on talent, because that's really, as I mentioned, a really important topic. I think there are two different dimensions. The dimension of startups looking for talents, like in Berlin, and then the corporates, as we are, of course, looking for talents. So the one solution is we have to make Berlin, for example, as a startup, much stronger, so we attract talent to Berlin for the startups. That's step one. Step two is how to get Talanx, Allianz, the talents, because they rather go to startups than to the corporates. And I think what we're trying to do at the moment, and we're still in the process of doing it, you have to, of course, get rid of hierarchy in the corporates. We build cross-functional teams. There is no IT versus business unit. They actually merge together. Some of our board members actually are responsible for IT and for the business unit, so it's not a differentiation anymore. The whole thing about work environment, work at home, bring your own device, and that kind of stuff. For startups, it's a daily thing, not for the corporates. And this is a huge process, especially in the insurance industry, which is an old industry, which people work in there for 30, 40 years to kind of get this transformation well done. And these are kind of things we have to do as a corporate, of course. This is our responsibility to make Berlin or other cities in Germany stronger as startup hubs. This is also something the politics can definitely help with.
Is it something politicians are getting? So if we look, especially as you mentioned, work from home and stuff like this, sometimes I have the feeling, and to be fair, I'm not always completely neutral as a moderator, sometimes I have the feeling that when we speak about the large things, they all like this because that's sexy to speak about, and that's actually you don't harm any special interest groups at the moment. But if we think about something like the writing down of working time, where we just had the new judgment, we end up in very, very bureaucratic processes. Do politicians really get what they need to focus on at the moment, from your perspective?
That's a tough question.
Be completely open. We are all within the.
Well, as Jörg said, we get it, but I think it's on this level. I think I can just repeat my my answer from before, at least on the corporate side. I don't know if like the government can help that much on the corporate side to in-source talent. They can work on the step before when you talk about universities, schools, the stuff I mentioned on my first answer, right? That's what the politics can work on, and I think they got it, actually. I think they got it, at least on the meta level. Concrete measures I haven't seen so far. Yeah. Chris, okay. Go ahead.
No, I think we need to, when this talent coming, actually, so I'm from Berlin, so of course I'm pro Berlin, but it's actually a problem that so many corporates came to Berlin and are playing startup, I would say, to a certain degree, because of course I mean, it's not you turning into a startup just when you wear sneakers or when you do have the same interior designer and you make a digital factory out of it. It's very difficult from the talent perspective if you want to try to copy something. Yeah, it's also, we cannot copy. I mean, we get questions lately on very much about our pension scheme, our health incentive scheme. We can also not copying the pension scheme of a Talanx or Allianz. Yeah, so please don't apply and ask for the pension scheme of an Allianz. We don't have it. It's not as good, and we don't have it. And then that we don't need to. If people don't want to switch to a certain culture, you don't push them. And I think corporates have a lot to offer. They have to offer a lot of things which are interesting for a lot of talents. A lot of talents don't want to change jobs every 6 months anymore, 9 months anymore, or they want to have a certain level of security. They want to have flexibility. They want to have maybe also different times. So I believe corporates are still, especially in Germany, are very attractive for a lot of different talent, and it has not just to do with, let's say, the office design. By the way, I think we have a great co-working place, but we definitely had the worst interior design because we had to pay it by ourselves. And so it's not about so much the aspects. It's a lot more about, I think, the purpose, what you're actually doing, and the ownership empowerment you give. And very often, and especially also when you talk to politicians, they just it too quickly comes to startups that the guys sitting in the open office, and then corporates do open office. Okay, now they're agile. I mean, I was simplifying, of course, and I know that these people on the stage are not thinking that way. But we need to be careful in this. Did you hear that now there's a DIN norm? Okay, I cannot translate DIN norm, okay, please. There's a DIN norm now coming up for startups, apparently, because then you can, I don't know, I think it's a state company builder, what they want to achieve with the DIN norm. I don't know what the goal is, actually. But we need to be careful that startup is not a word we're trying to copy, because a lot of the fintechs which are actually here are serious software firms. They ship and deliver software to financial institutions with all the burdens and regulations. So they are companies, and that's, I think, an important aspect when it comes to the talent discussions and how politicians see that.
Yeah, so Iga, I'd say last point on this, and then I have another topic.
I think two things that I learned. So first of all, I need to check the pension plan of Allianz. That seems to be really attractive. Laura, tomorrow you need to give me some guidance there. The second thing is, when we talk about startups and the bureaucracy within a corporate, I have an anecdote that I really like because it happened to me. A good friend of mine, a Berlin entrepreneur, he has built up from scratch a huge unicorn. And once he called me, that was like 2-3 years ago, and he asked me, so we spoke, and he was like, dude, can you share the travel guidelines of your company with me? And I was like, why do you need the travel guidelines that we have? He said, well, it's getting out of control. So because at that time he had like 3,000 people, right? So he was like, it's getting out of control. I need to implement travel guidelines because otherwise I'm really losing control. Can you share that with me? So why I'm saying that is, yes, you are agile and you are fast up to a certain level. And after a certain level, you need to have the structures, right? I think this is something that's evident. I mean, if you compare that, let's take Allianz as an example, or let's take Deutsche Bank as an example. If you have like 90,000 or 140,000 employees, right? Yes, of course, bring your own device is difficult, right? Or to say, well, we don't have any travel guidelines. Of course, bureaucracy comes with it, but otherwise you can't run it. So that's, basically the point I'm trying to make here is, yes, it's a startup. At that time, it should be agile, and when it grows, it will get structures, and that's why we have decided to say we invest into late-stage, growth-stage companies, because they also understand that we have processes. So it's not like I call Nazim and say, I have a financing route, I need 5 million tomorrow. So no, that doesn't work. I'm not managing my own fund, right? So I have processes, I have to go through that. And those major companies, they understand that. So they know, okay, because they have their own processes. And the second part is, when we talk about digital, so it's like, it's the digital finance conference, we always associate with digital startup, right? It's like the startup, it's in the garage, it's like 2 people coding something, having a great idea. Digital is there around since 3 decades or 4 decades, so there are really major companies, and we should also try to get rid of this idea or this perception that everything that is digital has to be a startup, has to be 2-3 people, getting 100,000 or 1 million of raise, and that's it, how I run the business.
Maybe picking up on this, because actually, let's not forget we are speaking about the European market, and there's one thing which really comes to my mind on a regular basis, especially when I hear things like your cookies that just mentioned. There, in the US, there's this famous anecdote when Mark Zuckerberg got the offer for Facebook being sold, and he would have become a billionaire in this moment, and he decided against the sale. And at the same time, there's quite a lot of talk that in Europe, too many founders sell too fast. Do we think European enough? So are we ambitious enough in what we do? Are companies founded here, also from your perspective, you look at different companies, and also to all of you, maybe as one of the last rounds, are we ambitious enough in what we do, or are we focus too much on the national level, whatever the small scale businesses? Who wants to go first?
It's probably true, like what you said about Mark Zuckerberg, but I'm not knowing this example in detail, but I guess he already has 20 million, 30 million in secondaries at that moment. So to reach a company, I mean, I don't know if you saw that the Uber business angel with 5K, he made 130 million. If you reach that size, it's also easy to say, I think, no, when you have the offer for $1 billion, if you have 30, 40 million at home. I think, yes, we have a problem that the total size for a lot of entrepreneurs maybe it's not high enough, and then, okay, you're getting older over time, building a company takes a while, you have family and so on, you waited a long time to get a proper salary and so on, then maybe, yes, we're selling too early, but it's also because we're maybe not willing in the European ecosystem to accept certain valuations. And yes, this gets the problem, because if the valuations are not high enough, not a wider crowd gets enough money, which then can invest again. Yeah, I mean, Rocket Internet, you have to thank them as Germany, as Europe, but also especially as Berlin, because they also, like the Zalando exit is a good example. Yeah, this is one of the biggest exits we had here in Germany. But it brought a lot of capital to a lot of people, a lot of smart people, who then could invest in the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. This is currently missing because we don't have so many Zalandos, unfortunately. Yes, why don't we have so many Zalandos? I don't know, maybe because we sell too early, maybe it's definitely, maybe because the ambitions are not right. I think it's a combination of everything, but it's also the combination that maybe we also sometimes, especially in this country, the country of savers, maybe too skeptical and want to see the right numbers right away and fitting everything, and maybe we're not enough believers sometimes that we can go big. And I think this is, from the ambition levels, definitely a problem. But this comparison with the US is sometimes very hard, because it's just a different animal.
Dominik, as you focus so much on this, do you want to add?
2 theses. One thesis is the cultural thing, of course, and the other one is the hurdle thing. We mentioned before, in Germany, to raise up a startup, it's hard if you want to get big. Then to scale up into other European countries, there are so many hurdles on this. Lack of harmonized laws, etc., different data protection laws, well, not anymore, sorry about that, different tax laws, and so on and so on. So the hurdle is really high to get from the 80 million German market to the 500 million European market. This could be one reason. The other one, you just mentioned the cultural thing. In America, I just talked to a guy from Silicon Valley yesterday, and I asked the question for tonight, and he was like, here we are so proud to own stuff. So we rather have our own small car dealership at the corner of the city than working for a large corporate. And this culture of owning throughout the years is much stronger in the state than it is here. So you make a startup, and then you're like, well, okay, I can make some money, I get out of it. So these are 2 theses, I don't know if they're right, the cultural aspect and the aspect of hurdles to scale up fast and easy in the European context. And that's what we have to work on. That's the topic of the conference here.
Miriam.
Just adding a few things. I mean, we were also a startup, really small, had many hurdles, and it was in the first years we could not go international because of all the, let's say, regulatory hurdles. But I would say today, I mean, we're getting 10 years old and we are so ambitious as never before. So we have a lot of power, and actually now we have a lot of money to get really big now. And this is a really interesting time for us. So, and I think we are still in the same team together since 8 years. This is at the moment, it feels like a great new thing that is coming, and I had years in between where I was not that ambitious, but now it's really rising up again, because I think now we have a different kind of, let's say, position in order to build something better and bigger. And this is great now, and I think it's not the lack of ambition that there is with founders, but it's also, especially in fintech industry, it was a huge burden with all the regulatory framework. So, I mean, it took us, we started quite early to approach for a license, for a financial institutions license, and it took us almost 3 years to get it. It was really difficult. I think it has really changed in the last years, but the time when we started applying for it, it was really a long way to go there, and it cost us a lot of money, and we didn't have so much money at that time.
So indeed, compliments to the regulator. For us, it was roughly half a year, so there was some improvement. Your view on this?
Look, Chris, I think, look, if the founders at some point do cash in by doing secondaries, I think that's absolutely okay, and they deserved it. Also, if you look at the, when you're in these companies, if you look at the wage levels with what they are working, how they have built the company, I think is absolutely fair. The second thing, this is what Cookies was talking about. If you look at the equity markets, right? I mean, for a European startup, it is easier to sell in a round on a secondary than really speculating on an IPO. And I think if you're in the US, the probability of doing an IPO is much higher, so people are waiting. And I think that's part of it. So, and from that perspective, I don't think it's an ambition topic. I mean, these guys are entrepreneurs, right? If somebody has built up a successful company, so they know how to calculate, they know how to reckon.
Julian is already getting slightly nervous now, so I have to admit, originally we planned to have questions now publicly. In this case, as he's pushing so hard, I would suggest, I guess all of you are still here for a while, so let's have the talks privately afterwards. I hope all of you enjoyed the discussion, and let's now proceed. Thanks. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much.